All right, Fernando.
Hello, everyone. This is the IPython Dev Meeting, or IPython/Jupyter project Dev Meeting for July 24th. And I guess one of the first items of note is that our minutes on HackPad have been split into two documents now. I guess it was becoming too slow. So are we going to work off of the new document today?
Are we?
Do we have?
Well, our agenda is still in the old one, but we can copy it across.
Yeah, let's copy it across. It is getting sort of silly.
All right, so let's copy. Since it's one big copy, who's going to do the copying? So is somebody doing it? Only one person should do it. Okay.
Thomas will do it.
So is the IPython.hackpack.com owned by any of us, or is it?
I don't think you know how that works.
It's owned by just about everybody.
I thought, Kyle, you started it, didn't you?
I started it, but I gave everybody ownership to it.
Okay.
I know I have ownership. I can make stuff.
Is it possible to move our old one to that org?
What do you mean by that, Brian? I'm not sure I understand.
All of our other hackpads are not part of that IPython hackpad domain. I mean, early on, I just created them, and they're
one by one. You mean they're like random documents on hackpad versus kept together under one org? Is what you mean?
View history. I wonder, add to collection? Is that what it is?
Should we actually be using Jupyter.hackpad?
Not yet. We'll get there.
Yeah. Okay. Eventually, we'll get there to what the whole transition of everything.
I think it was one of the things that we went and got when we were having that day of rounding up all the names, didn't we?
Yeah, it would be great if we could move.
Yeah, consolidate all the documents into one place.
Yeah, the members. Okay. Well, anyway, actual thing.
So 6126.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have the goal of this pull request is to create the user interface for selecting kernel/language for a notebook, and the current pull request puts this a selector in the notebook heading, which here I'm using to refer to the topmost div on the page that has the IPython notebook logo and the whatchamacallit, the document name and date as well. And I complained loudly about that, and I'm trying. I think the best way that I have of summarizing, I mean, I think there was some points that I made that were secondary, and I don't want to get lost in those points. I think my main point is that that heading should be used for as much as possible for site-wide information, and as we move to the multi-user notebook, we're going to be adding a lot more site-wide navigation content in that area. And then the second part is that control is out of the visual hierarchy where all other such controls are, I think. Now, there's some disagreement about that because I think Thomas would say that actually this is on par with the document name, and so it's in the right location. I don't agree with that, but is that a correct statement, Thomas?
I mean, this is like the document name. It's something that you don't need to change very often, but having it prominently visible makes sense. And then, if you've got a prominent visible thing, as you know, having that be the thing where you change the name or the document language just makes it obvious where to go for that.
So one comment that I would make is that, or Brian, are you did you want to go further into stuff before we start discussing? I don't want to cut you off.
No. I mean, I was next going to make one of the points that you made on the point, but why don't you make your points yourself?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So first of all, is the fact that that area is often disabled, and so I think we want to be mindful of the fact that often that area is disabled. But furthermore, I actually think that changing that language should be something that is actually very rare, even more rare than renaming a file, because in most cases, once you've started a notebook in a given language and you've written a bunch of code in that language, it's not really sensible. I mean, if you have 100 lines of R, you're not going to all of a sudden turn it into a Ruby notebook all of a sudden. It just doesn't make any sense, right? So I think that in practice, that choice is a choice that will typically, in the vast majority of cases, will be made once at document creation time, and that's it. I'm not saying it'll never need to be toggled, and for example, Python 2, Python 3 changes are a sensible thing to be able to do, but something like that can fit perfectly well in the menus. What I think is critically important is that the user has always visual feedback of what language any given notebook is in, even if they've disabled the header. So I think, in my mind, what is really important is to have a short form of having a description, probably next to the kernel status and somewhere kind of where our kernel status and editing status indicators are, that lets you know where what language you're working on, so that if you disable the header and the toolbar, you still see those things. But I would not consume either header space nor toolbar space for something that in practice is honestly most users will never change that. They'll make a notebook and they'll be done with it. And once they've created a notebook, that's it. It's actually more common to rename a file because you decide that you didn't like the name you gave it than to change the language halfway through, because in most cases it's simply impractical to change. I mean,
you have to completely rewrite the notebook.
Yeah, you have to rewrite the whole thing. I mean,
just jumping back to the point about this should always be visible, I think this is going to be one of those days where I just disagree with everybody. I don't think it always needs to be visible, because you have the syntax highlighting and the entire content of the notebook showing you what language you're working with. I think if you disable the header, I mean, like the document title is invisible, I think it's fine for kernel.
It's if you want to hide the document title, I don't think you're going to forget what kernel, because that's never going to be default behavior.
Well, but
not knowing what document you're in is
the tab in the browser shows you that document, so you still have a mnemonic for that document.
Well, in all my cases, it shows you 1 to 4 characters of the title.
So I was thinking about this, that all of us are capable of looking at a code cell and immediately inferring the programming language from the syntax highlighting and the syntax of the language. New users have no ability to do that. And so I think even
aren't going to be working with a dozen different languages.
No,
they're going to be working with one or at most 2 languages.
But if the language that they want to be working in is not the default, we have to provide them with the indicators. Oh, this is not R like you think it is. This is Python.
Yeah,
but new user will not
they just don't hide the header.
Yeah, so new users, hiding the header is completely irrelevant to new users, right?
Well, but we often present, and we almost always present to new users.
It is not important that new users looking at our presentation. I don't think that holds any weight.
Yeah, if you're presenting, you will be talking about what language the code is in, what it's doing. This just seems like a complete red herring that we have to. I mean, when you have a text editor open, you don't have a big flag on the side saying, like, by the way, this is Python.
Actually, Emacs does, and I find it extremely useful. Emacs shows the mode at the bottom in the mode line, and I find that extremely useful.
And I think it's really important, though, that all of us, again, can infer language very quickly and easily, but we have a lot of users who do not have that ability, and And also, even this idea, I mean,
In this case, are we also going to push it on NB Viewer?
I think we do need to somewhere know the
absolutely.
language on NB Viewer.
Absolutely. I think once we encode that in the notebook files, I think it would be awesome if NB Viewer showed you what language any given notebook is in.
Especially subtle things like Python 2 versus Python 3. Right? I mean, sure, someone may know it's Python, but they may not realize, oh gosh, this one is written in Python 3, so when I run it locally, I need to be aware of that.
No, and actually, I think on NB Viewer it's even more important, because on NB Viewer you see random notebooks created by other people, and those may be languages you don't even recognize, right? And they may not have stated explicitly what language they're writing. They may not have written in the text, this notebook is written in so and so. And if you see Haskell code, most of us can't recognize Haskell syntax just straight out, or F# syntax straight out, right? So if anything, in NB Viewer, I think it's even more important to communicate that to the users.
And also, we have to remember that with this UI change, we will be the first people on the planet to offer an environment like this that includes multiple languages. That means it's a brand new abstraction.
My text editor includes multiple languages. It has
but it's not
language selection.
But
that's just not even close to true.
But I think live code is something that's very different, and I think it's a new abstraction for people who I mean,
I don't think it's new for anybody who's used a text editor.
Yeah, the concept of this program can handle more than one language is so far from novel.
Right, I mean, when I open a new document in TextMate, it defaults to Python, and I can write some code, and until I save it as a JavaScript file, it looks like.
So I regularly work with people who don't understand even the abstraction of programming languages.
Yeah, but I just mean this is absolutely not like wild new territory.
Yeah,
this is something that text editors have been doing for decades.
And I guess I'm thinking about all of our users who have never used a text editor. And
exactly.
There are many, many, many. I mean, go talk to Greg Wilson.
Exactly. We have Greg has ample evidence of users to whom technical computing is Excel, right? And to whom
at the same time, yeah, again, these users are not going to be using a dozen different languages. You're going to be teaching them really in one language.
But they may be given a document by someone else in their lab. They may be. I mean, I'm not sure that I understand.
And embedded in the document is the language, right? So that's also not an issue.
What's that?
And the document also specifies the language it's in, right?
But
if they don't know what a text editor is, then they will have much bigger problems with the notion of changing programming languages than the fact that if you hide the header, you can't see what language this is.
Yeah, hiding the header is definitely completely irrelevant to whether it should go in the header or not, I think.
Yeah,
it is a reasonable assumption that users who might have a problem with this will never, ever, ever, ever hide the header in their entire lives.
I mean, I am a user who who is likely to switch between languages a lot, and I am stating as a fact that I would want that information, and I typically work with headers off just because I care too much about vertical space, and I am stating as a fact that I would very much find it useful to have that information in front of me. Next, basically the three key pieces of status that I think will become relevant is my kernel running or not, because that blocks execution, what editing mode I'm on, and what language am I using. Those are kind of the three key pieces of the mental radar about what the notebook is doing for a user. And I'm not sure that I understand the reluctance to provide that information in a single location. Also because now that we have kernel status and editing status next to each other, that seems to be the natural place for the user to look and kind of very quickly, with a simple glance, get their bearings on what's going on. What's my kernel doing? What's my editor doing? And what language am I in? These are
my reluctance is from jamming everything into the menu bar because people can turn every other UI element off. Seems like a bad way to design UI.
I mean, we're not talking about adding everything here. I think that's an overstatement. We're adding one additional piece of information.
And every piece of information that is important.
There is one difference that like all indicators are really small, and this indicator take really a lot of space.
Yeah, if you can communicate the language in 24 pixels.
Yeah, that's the tricky. But that is a
because
valid point.
we don't exactly have free space available.
Yeah, so that is a very valid point that I am indeed worried about, which is the. That I think is a much more valid concern.
It's not important to me that this go in the header because it's hidable or anything. It's just that the menu bar space is relatively precious.
Yes.
And putting whole words in there is using space we don't really have.
If it were going to be in the menu area, I would be tempted to create a new menu to the right of help or to the left of help, and the name of that menu would be the current language, and its items when you clicked on it would be the other languages. Like combine the indicator with the selection.
And why not? Why is that not the kernel menu already?
Maybe it is. I mean, maybe maybe we'll just rename the kernel menu to the current language and put the other options.
Kernel parentheses Python or something.
Or not even parentheses. Make it
just say.
I think if the menu is called something like, if the menu is called the name of your language, then I think it's highly non-obvious that that's where you go to change the language. I mean, if I see a Python menu, that's not where I go to look for R.
That makes sense.
Well, but any selector.
But that's what we have right now with the.
Yeah, I mean, any
Python button.
A button with a drop-down looks like, this is what it currently is. This is where I go to change it. The title of a menu you do not expect to change.
No, it is true that it's not completely obvious, but I'm not sure we're going to find a perfect solution here. I mean, it is true that it's not completely obvious, but there's some appeal to that in that, one thing that happens with menus is you learn them. They may not be 100% obvious at first glance, but once you click on them once, you understand what they do.
But a menu with a name that can change depending on the value of the kernel.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on if a user has a default menu, which is a default kernel, which is R or Python or Julia, you have to click the kernel menu, which basically has a name that changes depending on your configuration. That's crazy.
Well, but the idea of
all our vaunted new users that we were just talking about won't have learned that the Python menu is what you click on to get to an R.
We might want to do something like kernel, and then in parentheses the kernel name, or the kernel colon the name,
really makes it any more obvious, especially because going back to our new users yet again, the idea of kernel is not something that they're going to get. They're thinking about languages.
Yeah, they already don't know what a kernel is.
I mean, we could just put non-clickable text after help that indicates the current language, and have the kernel menu be a separate thing where users select things.
How is it? What makes it obvious that it's a non-clickable text and not part of the menu name?
That would be a question for our designer. But no, it would need to be different. You couldn't use the same typography.
But I mean, the menu items are already black text with no particular highlighting.
It would have to be different. I mean, it would have to have some styling that indicates not clickable, not part of the menu.
It doesn't feel like there's any convention for doing that in a menu bar.
Putting on the right, I mean, in that regard, the right-hand side at least creates visual separation because the right-hand side items are unclickable already.
The only issue with the right-hand side is the notification area there is when it, like, save a notebook, and the notification area is big. Like, I mean, everyone's right that we don't have a lot of spare space there.
No, that's.
I mean, we can push. I mean.
Also, if you put the name over there, then you're losing the one of the things I like with the current design is that the place where you see what the current language is also the place you go to change what the language is. If you put what the language is over on the right and have it changed from the kernel menu, I think every suggestion I've heard for putting it in the menu bar just seems to make it harder for new users to understand what's going on.
I mean, it doesn't prevent from putting things in the menu themselves, but I mean, the thing we need to focus on is the indicator, because once we have the indicator, we can just make it a drop down.
We keep having a lot of kind of design tension over kind of status information. I wonder if we should go back to the idea of having a status, an entire vertically thin but dedicated status bar at the bottom, which is an area where we can add a few other things. I mean, it feels to me like we keep needing a little bit of a UI area for indicators and small controls that is different from menus. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't just bite the bullet and put a little status bar at the bottom.
I mean, we could, I mean, not with our current pager design very easily, but as we move away from the pager we have, we could put a horizontal space at the bottom that sort of hovers over the content. I mean,
My only objection to that is that I've trained
Why not
myself
like
from a long
GitHub?
time using browsers and text editors to basically ignore thin bars at the bottom.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think this is an easy design decision.
No, it's not.
So, sorry.
But I do think that the heading area is my least favorite. I mean, I feel like the menu. Now that I think about it, I agree with Fernando that the toolbar is not wonderful. I think it needs to be visible even when the heading and the toolbar are hidden. But in addition, I think we're going to have to redesign the heading area in the multi-user notebook effort to enable us to put global site nav there. And you can look. I mean, I think it's a good Google Drive is a great example of this, because they sort of try to balance the global site nav. They try to keep the vertical impact small, but their document names are in that area, and so that's just, it's going to have to be something we redesign anyway. One, we'll have new logo, but two, there's going to be the global site nav. And
yeah, logos. It reminds me, we're also going to, at some point, put the kernel logos somewhere. The header is kind of the only obvious place that they can go, and it seems fairly obvious to me that the indicator telling you what the kernel is and when you select different kernels would go near the kernel logo.
Is a logo sufficient, or is that too obscure for people who don't know what the logos look like?
Yeah, I think there needs to be a
actual text
lecture as well.
Well, and the thing with the logo is also that it's not going to be very obvious if we make the logo a selector that you can click on.
Oh no, I don't think we should make it a selector. I think the selector does need to be in the kernel menu. Like that's me. Minimally there. It may be somewhere else as well, but I think it needs to be in the kernel menu.
Yeah, something like kernel interrupt restart, and then something like select kernel language or something like that with a drop down or a sub area that lets you switch to a new one that would do what is said in the discussion of the PR, a kernel restart, and would annotate would update the metadata in the field. That I agree. I think belongs in the kernel menu. So it seems like basically, obviously, we will have the logo, in just for branding reasons and just a little bit of visual flair. I think that's fairly well agreed upon, that there will be a logo somewhere in the heading area. Whichever way it gets redesigned, there will be a language logo or a kernel logo. That's uncontroversial. I think we agree that the kernel menu should have those controls as well, regardless of what we do, whether there's a toolbar icon, there's a top area selector, the kernel menu should have those. And so I think the remaining question is, where and how do we put a compact control that doesn't fight with space with our very limited space availability in the various areas? Does it go in the header? Does it go in the toolbar? Or does it go somewhere in the menu bar, whether it's some contraption with text or some contraption on the right? Those seem to be the options, right? So is that a fair summary? Because I don't think we shouldn't spend an hour and a half on this only question, but is that a fair summary of what we agree upon and what we don't agree upon?
Well, I'm taking notes on this. So I have heading area should have a language kernel. Kernel menu should have kernel selection items.
And I would add to the first sentence logo, right? Just to make it clear that
that's what he wrote. He just.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let me read again then.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Kernel menu should have kernel selection items, indicator of active kernel somewhere. Indicator / selector, I would say, right? Because that's kind of the tricky part.
Yeah, it could be a selector as well.
Yeah. Or selector.
Okay.
Of active kernel somewhere, and that third one seems to be the challenging one, right? Do we?
Because UI area precious.
Yeah, because it's really real estate. It's really an issue of real estate.
So with two proposals. One is that I think honestly we're just going to have to play around with different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I propose that we actually see if Adrian can help us just play around with different options quickly. To just see, I mean, I want to, she has other projects she's working on, and I'll talk about that later, but this would be something that allows us to move on and focus on other stuff, and she could come back and give us, okay, here's 5 different design ideas. How do they look?
Can I propose a twist on that idea, Brian, which would be, even though I actually don't like the PR the way it is right now, I would suggest that maybe because of conflicts and because we do need the functionality, that we actually merge it as is, where Thomas put it, just so that we have something, and so that we don't start having more conflicts with the I know that Thomas has had to rebase it already a couple of times, and then we can play with design mock-ups. And those design mockups could be first visual, they might even be non-functional design mockups that Adrian helps us with, and then later the ones that maybe gain traction, we can try basically new PRs that move this thing around, because I'm a little worried about blocking on this one.
Yes.
I think we all agree that the functionality is what we want. We're just not happy with exactly where to put it, but it's a big enough chunk that I would say let's just merge it the way it is, even though I'm actually not happy with it.
So I propose a twist on your twist, and that is, why don't we implement the things that we agree upon in the pull request, namely, let's put the selection in the kernel menu. I'm fine also putting an indicator up somewhere else temporarily, wherever that is, but let's at least have it in the kernel menu.
Yes, I guess that I didn't realize that the PR didn't have the kernel menu entry. So yes.
But I don't know.
But you read my mind. I guess what I meant was, let's do what we agree upon, but the one point of contention, let's leave it the way it is in the PR, rather than forcing the PR to go through any more churn on the contentious point. And then we can experiment using it as is, and we can play with different design ideas, and maybe in a couple of weeks we'll find something that we're all happy with.
Great.
Thomas, how does that sound? Since you're the one in charge of the PR, can Could you do that? Basically, add to the PR what's missing, but leave the selector where you put it, and we'll continue spinning on
Do we
this.
want to add support for the logos now? 'Cause,
No, I would wait. I mean,
I think all we really need to do with the logos is work out what size we want them to be. Yes, I like Min's idea here for indicating the kernel language. Min just has huge floating text over the entire page.
all caps, hopefully.
Oh, he's going to show you.
This is my prototype.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what we need. And we should implement with one of those like mouse position tracking tricks, so that as you move your mouse and try to hover it, it moves around and evades your mouse.
As usual, everyone will want Min's version of the notebook.
Exactly.
There are forks of Fontosum that have logo for different programming languages, which are basically 24 pixels.
Yeah, I
size.
had a look. It doesn't have very many programming languages. That's the trouble. I mean, it doesn't have like R, for example.
So
Just use the letter R.
Yeah.
So for the language logos, I have created in the Jupyter/design repository. Basically, I imported Python, R, and Julia logos.
But it will be up to the kernel authors to ship those logos,
Yeah,
not us.
getting the logos isn't the hard part. It's working out like what dimensions in pixels should the logo be, because we don't want the logo space to be changing size as people select different
I would leave that out of this PR, partly because that really gets into actual design territory, and I think that's where we should let Adrian work on that, would be my suggestion. So I would say let's keep this PR. It's important and complex enough as it is. Let's sort of finish up the kernel part, the kernel menu part, leave that selector where it is, even though we don't quite like it, and then Adrian can focus on the design questions and kind of bring her insights into that, and we can spin on that once she has something. How does that sound? So we can actually move forward.
Yeah,
That sounds good.
I agree. I have one question about the kernel spec and images. Is it a security problem to have the notebook server pulling files from outside the known tree of resources below the root directory?
Well, kernel specs is a separate known tree. I mean, like your custom JS things,
Okay, so you can, so the kernel specs, are the static resources like logos in kernel specs currently addressable in URLs? Like,
Yes. You refer to, I think it's like, kernel specs, name, and then logo.png or whatever file we decide to call it.
okay, so we already have URLs that make those accessible in the notebook.
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So it's really easy. We just have to decide on the design side of it in terms of where those go and the resolution. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Brief aside on our designer, is her name really pronounced Adrian? Because it looks like it should be Adrien or something. And Adrian to me sounds like a boy's name, so I'm kind of slightly weirded out every time anyone calls her that.
We'll have to ask her how exactly she pronounces it. I haven't met her yet, so
I'm assuming that I got the pronunciation from Zach Saylor, who spoke it in.
It's Adrian.
It's Adrian.
Adrian, yeah.
Okay.
We don't want to butcher her name.
Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, no problem.
So I've not been saying it incorrectly, have I?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, that's what I thought. Because yeah.
Yeah, not like this is on the air, so this is bad. But it does sound like the boy's name Adrian. So I know what you mean, Thomas.
Adrian.
We're farther from France here than England.
So Docker.
It is normal here for both the male and female Adrians. We've been the same.
Okay, fair enough.
Docker Hub.
Yeah, so I think back in June, Docker released their image building service.
Mhm.
You could like push up images and then do automated images from automated builds from GitHub or Bitbucket to Docker.
Can anybody else hear Kyle or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
No, not you.
no.
Turned
I want
on
to just type real fast.
Selective mute. That's weird.
I can hear him now. I hear you now.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the name of your image is up. I think people have actually downloaded and used it. Like, there's no practical purpose anybody using it, but I guess people were excited that went up there. So it would be great if other people go ahead and register on hub.docker.com so I can make other people owners of the IPython and Jupyter orgs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just me. Yeah, it kind of made me curious about creating like an official notebook container that someone could deploy. That just either we have ones that are hitting a specific tag, or even ones that are like the current dev branch. Without having to pull it, they can just pull the like base image, and it takes less time to build than anything else.
I mean, certainly having an official kind of 2.1 notebook wouldn't probably be a bad idea. I don't know. My only question is, what's kind of there's still cost and time for you to do that and build it and upload it and whatnot. Do you think there's a real benefit to people? I can imagine once the multi-user server comes out, being super useful to have official Docker images of the multi-user server. If you think that the benefit of having official images for the single user notebook server right now up is there, I don't mind. I'm just wondering what the cost benefit analysis is.
I think we should treat this as a hypothesis. Namely, we hypothesize that it might be useful.
See what happens.
Exactly, and if it's not useful, well, as long as it's not a massive time investment, I think it's a good experiment.
It's simply, like the MVViewer one took me no time at all.
Okay.
Simply, you write out the Docker file. It's like you run all the apt-get commands or whatever the base image, so if you're on Ubuntu. And then install the actual package, and then configure it so it has like the right entry point. So like a base one that's not locked down, right? It has no password. It has no certs. Is no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the like base configuration that we may want to enforce on a user, I'm not sure what that would be. Like, do we make people take a password in? Like when they deploy the container, does it have to have like an environment variable set that's the password for the notebook?
I think that's a good idea. I mean,
that's when I start wondering if this is if this is a wise use of our time. I mean, maybe it is. I'm not saying it isn't, but once it begins kind of springing questions and decisions and development.
So actually, can we? Is there a way in Docker Hub to track usage?
Yeah, it shows downloads, but it doesn't necessarily tell me unique downloads, like per user.
Okay, then I mean, if we want to treat it sort of as an experiment, then let's start with the simplest possible thing.
Yeah.
Like don't just anytime there's a decision, pick the simplest possible answer.
Okay. Yeah, I think
put
just
it up
base
and see what
installation
happens.
and run the notebook.
Yeah, and then let's just see what happens. And if a lot of people start to use it and they start to ask us for passwords and certs and everything, well, then we know it's worth adding those things.
Okay. So I guess I can probably just I'll create a separate repository for it
Sure.
for now, and then yeah. And the real reason I'm like curious about doing this is that if I guess I don't care too much about the notebook itself, but if we had self-contained units that could run the kernels for whatever language, and like they have like a base Docker file or whatever. So somebody says, "Hey, I want to go ahead and fire up a kernel like sandboxed over here," then it would be really simple for them to do that, like with the current infrastructure that's out there to like deploy like a Docker container. So what I'm really curious about is like setting that up for people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, I think the important thing is to do really simple experiments to sort of test the waters and see what people find to be valuable.
Okay.
For example, if you imagined creating a kernel Docker container, is Docker going to allow all of the 0MQ traffic that would need to go in and out of that container for that kernel to actually be reachable by?
Yeah, you can set up port forwarding things. So it's fairly easy to forward ports. The only tricky bit is getting the connection file to know what those ports are, which shouldn't be hard. I mean, it's moving one file as a part of spinning up the instance. So.
I guess in order to do that, then, do we need to look at doing the encrypted channels on the 0MQ?
If you're using Docker, if you're using local Docker, I don't think there's a reason to.
Yeah.
But if it's remote,
If it's remote, then you should.
Yeah, I would start either with local Docker kernels or remote Docker entire notebook servers.
Yeah, the entire notebook server has the advantage that all of the complicated traffic is inside the container. And the only traffic outside the container is a single HTTP port.
Right.
And so there's a lot less to worry about than trying to get all of the multi-port traffic happening through.
Yeah, and we can investigate adding support for secure 0MQ to IPython. It's not very complicated. It's just a couple of key files, but it's tricky because just because you have 0MQ doesn't mean you have it with the library that implements encryption is an optional dependency of 0MQ. So just because you have it doesn't mean just because you have 0MQ doesn't mean you have secure 0MQ.
Okay.
So I don't think we could reasonably depend on it. So it would need to be an optional extra thing. But it shouldn't be tricky to add that to our notion of sockets can include curve security keys and things.
yeah, okay. So I guess it makes me wonder if I should like tackle that. So maybe I'll just go ahead and make the notebook server Docker file, and then,
let's start with
I think
that.
that's the most useful one.
and then I'll just yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right, 6178.
Damien.
Yeah. Essentially, this is a PR a guy has presented about the possibility to make some formatting in the IPython slides using metadata information under the slideshow thing. So essentially, the idea he brings is modify the template from the IPython slides and be able to set up the slideshow metadata with information to customize the final IPython slide output. And I think it is an interesting idea because this brings to the user, to the advanced user, a really easy way to modify their IPython slides. And the basic user, the naive user, just use he doesn't know anything about the metadata, and he or whatever use the IPython slides as is now. So I think it is an interesting compromise between the possibility to customize the IPython slides, not bringing all the user interface complexity inside the notebook to modify.
So one comment is, because all this formatting is specific to Reveal.js, if we do it, I think it should be under a Reveal.js key in the metadata, not a slideshow.
Okay.
So I think we need to keep the slideshow namespace for completely generic slideshow metadata that could work in everything from PowerPoint to Reveal.js to whatever else.
Okay. Yeah, sounds reasonable.
I mean, but that's sort of a minor implementation point rather than a question of do we want to do this.
-2
And in that sense, I would prefer it in general if we tried to keep sort of as much as possible of the Reveal work together in one place that could be developed kind of on its own, the support, the extensions, as Matthias says, so it can be released separately. And also because I don't think we should marry sort of too much of the output formats into the core.
There is one issue, which is that we don't have a single example on how to ship a separate Python package that have templates.
A separate Python package that what?
That have new templates for NB convert. So it is possible, but we have no documentation and no example on how to do it.
Well, this could be.
You mean other than the entire repo of examples for custom NB convert output?
It's not a simple thing that we can point people to and say you should do like that if you want a special template to extend.
Yeah, in my blog I wrote about how you can customize your templates to modify the slides and give another kind of output. But it's true about the thing that we don't have any documentation about, or any official documentation about how to modify NB convert things as a package or something like that.
Well, could helping this person turn this into a little standalone package be at least the start of that?
Mm-hmm.
Basically,
yeah. Take slides out of IPython and make a new project.
Or even just extending with all the reveal option. You should be able to have a Python package that have TPL file, and then by saying to NB-convert, use this package, this template in this package, which is like, I don't know, Rise, if you want to, Damian, to publish your Rise stuff as a special package. You could say, my template that I want to use is rise.something, and NB-convert should be able to use it if it's on a separate package.
Yeah, I'm sort of trying to push for as much decoupling as we can from core. We're already crumbling under the weight in core, and so something like this that has a well-defined scope, it's making the reveal support better. And I mean, it's a very important use case, but I'm thinking the more those use cases can stop bottlenecking on us as the core team, the better off both that project and the core team are going to be. Because right now there's just too much contention on too few of us. So
I just wanted to clarify one thing. Are you proposing moving the Reveal.js as a whole to a separate project, or just better Reveal.js to a separate project?
Initially the improvements, but I actually would like to ask Damian if he wouldn't want to move the Reveal support to be a standalone project, because that might actually give him more freedom. And it might make it easier to develop both. And it can remain a project under the organization, but I'm talking about the main repo, right? That we are really crumbling under the weight of the review pressure and the amount of code that has to be merged in the main repo, separating separating that into I mean, and I don't want to feel Damian to feel like we're kicking him out, but I think it's a process that we know we need to do. We need to simplify our management of the pieces of the project into separate repos, because once it is in a standalone repo, Damian can basically make most of the decisions by himself. He can basically approve pull requests and merge them and release them, and we only have to worry about the main repo if ever there's an API change. So now I don't want to force that decision on Damian before he thinks it's ready, but I actually would like to see that happen if possible.
Yeah, in fact, I think in the future will be useful for people to have it outside IPython, but the coupling with the IPython machinery has to be very fluid in the way that they can just install the thing without worried about customize on things and something like that. I think we are not in that point yet. Yeah.
And I think this would be a fantastic, I think the usual approach that we work should be used here, and that is, let's use this as a test case to develop the right extension points in NBViewer to enable NBViewer to call out to third-party installed libraries to do conversions. So someone can still do NB convert -- to some nice name, but have it call out to a separate library, and
we're not going to be able to get a short name to map to another package.
It could be long name. It could be reveal dot, and IPython will be like basically a package name dot configuration.
Yeah. So there are different levels at which this, because the only way you can get a really short key is if we use something like setup tools entry points. Is the only way that packages can tell an NB convert about. Like if we use package paths, like rise.foo, that's fine.
Yeah,
you're not going to be able to get better than that.
Yeah.
Without using setup tools stuff.
And I think it's obviously fine for non-core projects to use notebook metadata in any way they see fit. But I think our own core metadata usage has to be extremely conservative.
Yes.
And I think in a situation like this, that conservatism is really going to handcuff the development of the reveal stuff more than needs to actually happen. And so I think it will be able to move forward much quicker if it's not in the core like that.
Okay. Because, I think it will be an interesting challenge if reveal is taken out, because it's going to have, like, there's the cell toolbar should go with it.
What?
Well, can we start? Min, can we start for now with these improvements?
Yeah. But I just mean there are things that we want to be easy to customize, but that absolutely aren't easy to customize.
Yeah,
no, absolutely, and but I don't understand why the cell toolbar would go.
The one that's specifically for authoring slides.
Oh, but I use that regularly for other slideshow presentation approaches other than reveal.
Okay. It seems highly reveal specific, but okay.
Oh, I don't use the reveal stuff, but I use it. I also use it with Matthias's kind of old slide stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, I am using the same for Rise, so.
So okay, so let's then this code, and in the
Can other people hear Fernando?
No, I
No.
thought that was
Okay.
I thought it was selective mute on me again.
No. No, Fernando.
I think
No, that was
Hello?
quiet.
Hello?
Oh,
Yeah.
there
he's
you
muted
go.
while he's typing.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we can hear.
And so, no, I was saying, I'm typing, so I guess you
Yeah,
didn't-
don't type and talk. That's not
Well-
allowed.
That's kind of weird because I'm typing on a keyboard down here. And we'll try to move reveal.js out into reveal.js support into separate repo as time permits. Be the conclusion for this one, right?
Okay.
All right. Brian?
Yes. Hold on. Sorry, I navigated away. Design.
Yeah.
So yeah, Adrian has started working officially this Monday. We got all the contract work taken care of, so we can actually pay her in real dollars.
Bureaucratic victories, yes, those must be celebrated.
But actually, I mean, all things considered, it was not too painful this time.
Good.
And most of the early week I spent sort of working with her, just getting her up to speed on installing everything. So Python, GitHub, accounts on GitHub. She's going to use the GitHub app for Mac. So it was a lot of that. She is going to do her design work, at least for now, in branches of her Jupyter/design clone. So I had her fork that. She's got a local clone. She knows how to create branches. Her first project is going to be the Jupyter logo. And so her and I are iterating on a design brief for that. And she's starting to do background research on that. And I'll talk more about the design brief in a second. We're trying out Trello to manage the work, and I mean, we just started playing with it, so I can update folks on how that goes later. She does have a HipChat account, and we now have a public design room on HipChat, and so for design-related discussions, and hopefully soon she'll start to join our dev meetings. I need to ask her to see if she can join next week.
Yeah, great.
The Jupyter logo, there's a wiki page there where I've created the startings of a design brief. And if you can all look at that right now. So I looked on a few different websites about sort of what questions should a design brief answer. And I've tried to include those here. I think the biggest area where we need to fill in and have everyone help out with is what existing sites have logos, designs, and colors that we like. And Adrian said that information is really, really helpful for her. And she also said if we can put a link to the website and then also describe what about it we like.
Okay.
And so I put a link to GitHub, and I'm thinking we want to basically build a set of links that all of us find interesting, and like I don't think we need to argue about, oh well, I like this site but you don't. I think we should just get as many references as possible here. And then also, I mean, are there other questions that everyone think we need to answer in the design brief? You can see some of the questions on that wiki page I haven't filled in yet, but please, anyone else who wants to help work on this design brief, go for, like I think it would be great to get other people working on the design brief.
Yeah, I'll definitely jump in, since I have all the threads from the original naming discussion and whatnot, and kind of went through a lot of the thinking. I'll jump in, but thanks a lot for getting this moving, Brian. This is great.
And then I'm also there's another wiki page there on design principles, and with this it's more of a general look about design for IPython and Jupyter, and basically trying to write down design principles for the project. An example would be, create a clear visual hierarchy. And I'm also putting references that so far are the ones that I have found really useful in thinking about design, and would love it if other people want to start to contribute references, both books and online resources, and then also help sort of extract the most important parts from those references in the form of design principles.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, this is an ongoing thing, and I feel like right now it's a lot. In some ways, it's an exercise that helps bring Adrian on board and allow us to start to talk about design with her in a sort of a specific, concrete way. So that's I think that's all I had there about design. Yeah.
No, that's great, and I think it'll be very useful for us because this is her area of expertise, and we'll be able to have a better conversation with her if at least we educate ourselves a little bit in kind of basic ideas. Everybody, as we've said, everybody has opinions on design, and we are all very opinionated people, but opinions are a dime a dozen, and it would be very, very good if we educate ourselves a little bit on kind of basic ideas and points from the design literature, so that when we have a conversation with her, we can provide feedback that's a little bit more informed. I mean, this is always, we're building a bridge between people, two groups of people, or in this case an individual and a group of people who have very different backgrounds, and so in as much as she's going to plug into our process and learn about the project and other aspects of it, it's important that we learn a little bit about kind of her domain so that we can have a more intelligent conversation with her rather than simply spouting our uninformed but strongly held opinions. So I think this is great.
Okay. Yeah, and I should note that I list, there's two books that I list now. One is Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, the other is Design for Hackers. And if you only want to read one thing, Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug is super short. It's a very short, concise book. It reads really fast, and it's very effective at communicating the most important points.
There's another good book that I came across that I just read, even just at the bookstore, Lean UX. I think it's from O'Reilly.
Oh, cool.
And it made me feel a lot better about the possibility of somebody making decisions about things I use every day. That just the fact that there's a way to have designers on our team that doesn't feel like it's the Don or it's somebody that's going to sort of make decisions on our behalf, and it sort of walks through the process of what that's like.
Oh,
cool.
Could you add that?
Yeah,
absolutely. I was just logging into Airbears to do that. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Paul. I'll definitely check that book out.
Okay, 6196. Min?
Yes, 6196. The source maps. So, Jason opened a PR to update less, which adds support for source maps, but in such a way that was problematic for Git and merge conflicts and things because of minification problems.
Mm-hmm.
Basically meaning that any PR that touched CSS would cause conflicts. So yesterday I put something together that should make it less problematic. So keep the updated less, but make it a bit nicer to play with Git. And the basic points are: we don't track minified CSS. We track the compiled CSS, but not minified. So it shouldn't have conflicts unless there are sufficient changes.
Yeah.
We don't track source maps at all because it is impossible
We don't track. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
We don't track source maps at all because it is impossible. Any change to CSS will cause a merge conflict in. All changes conflict in source maps because they're basically one big base64 encoded line. And then because source maps aren't included in Git, and minified CSS is not tracked, I added steps to, like when we release IPython, we minify CSS. And then the Git hooks, if you want to use our Git hooks, they will build the source maps if the CSS changes, that kind of thing.
So is there... So do the source maps have to be regenerated each time the CSS changes?
Yes. That's the whole idea is the source map is taking a compiled small file and then relating it to the real original files. So anytime that file changes at all, the source map is wrong. It needs to be regenerated.
And can you clarify for me what is the change in workflow for people running from the Git checkout, if any?
None.
None? Okay.
So if you want to run from the Git checkout and you're not interested in fiddling with CSS, then no change at all. If you want to run from the Git checkout and investigate CSS using source maps, then you need the Git hook installed and the necessary less to generate the source maps on checkout.
Yeah. Well, if you use the Git hooks, then you don't need to do anything, because anytime you check out, it'll be up to date. If you don't use the Git hooks, you can just run setup.py CSS to build the.
So does Fab CSS compile the CSS and create the source maps?
Yes.
Okay, so
it just doesn't add them to the repo.
Okay, great. So the usual. I want to make sure that when people are developing and working on the CSS,
if you're working on CSS and you have if you have made less changes and they're in CSS,
yes,
you have the source maps.
Great. Okay, that's yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's a reasonable compromise to this business. And does that pull request need further review?
I think there might be one or two comments left to address. I'll make sure that, but they're not on what it does. They're on how it does it.
Yeah. No, I think the what it does is a good idea.
Is there any way to watch the less file while Tornado is running, and when you change it, it automatically compiles?
And you can run a daemon that, you can watch file system events to carry compilation on, but
there's no easy tool to do that. You would have to write something yourself.
I would put that as a separate utility, and on some you can use iNotify.
As a less option. I just saw that less as an option, like watch or something like that, and it was easy to add.
Oh, right, maybe.
So less itself can run as a daemon?
Yeah, I think.
Interesting. Okay.
5938.
Yeah, content. So Brian did another pass on the content service.
So do you want me to do another pass, Min? Is it ready for that?
I will look through it one more time to make sure that I've addressed all the things I think I've addressed.
Okay.
But I think I have. Yeah, and then if you want to,
just ping me on HipChat. I'm around today and can run through it again.
Okay. Yeah, because I would like to get.
Yeah.
No, this looks great though. I'm really happy to see this moving forward.
Okay.
Okay, does anybody have anything else? Otherwise, we can finish at a slightly reasonable time, which would be great.
One question.
Yeah.
Should I put the Docker file up on the IPython or Jupyter?
The what?
Should I put the Docker file up on the IPython or Jupyter org?
Is it for the notebook server?
Yeah.
I mean, let's put it under IPython for now in the sense that the commands that it runs, I don't know, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I would sort of think that because right now that stuff runs from IPython repos, it's an IPython command. What people apt get installed is IPython. I would say keep it there.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter a whole lot.
Can somebody create that for me?
Create what?
Oh, a repo. I'll ask in HipChat.
Yeah, no, I could do
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that.
I don't know if people know this, but NBViewer is also available on HTTPS nbviewer.jupyter.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I mean, yes.
But that's a problem with individual pages that load HTTP content. But.
We need to put on the agenda starting to actually move things, and obviously
that's a big.
There's an argument to be made that everything new that we do, maybe we should put it on Jupyter, just at least have less stuff to move afterwards. But I don't know. I don't feel super strongly about it. Maybe
I'm kind of tempted if we move to the Jupyter org that we could like. If we move to the Jupyter org for like NBViewer, we can rethink our URL scheme as we transition.
Yeah.
Instead of like pointing people there. Yeah.
And that's partly why that's going to take some work, because it is an opportunity to do maybe learn a few lessons and make some changes, but that means there's going to be real work to be done.
It's not just renaming.
Yeah, it's not just it's not running a text substitution. There's thinking involved. So I don't know. Maybe in the interest of doing the things that don't require thinking, just leave it under IPython for now, and we'll have to tackle. I think we need to focus on the multi-user and the kind of the burning things for the next couple of months, and then put on the agenda for the dev meeting some thinking about the actual repo partitioning for next year for next year.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, anybody?
No.
Alrighty, we can finish at a reasonable time. Thanks, everyone. See you guys later.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.